AUDEN LARRATT has a super match coming up in less than 3 weeks out from today at King of the Table. Lately, he's been hitting some crazy numbers on arm wrestling specific lifting. Today, we're going to analyze AUDEN's recent training video. So AUDEN has been getting super strong over the past year or two, especially on his pronation lift. And jumping right into this, one of the first things we're going to see is AUDEN doing some triples on his standard pronation lift. Now, it's a little bit difficult to tell how much weight this one is, but these are super easy. I don't think that this is an indication of where his 1 rep max is at. Looks like maybe we have a 50-pound plate on the bottom. This one might be a 25-pound plate. And then I'm guessing that maybe this is a 10 underneath. If he's doing 2 25s and then a 50, that's just insane. Plus this weight on the top. But this looks super easy for him. I'm guessing that this is significantly under 100 pounds, but clearly not his 1 rep max. What's probably more interesting is over here to the left of AUDEN, or to his right, we have this stack. And it's possible that this could be Devin's stack, but I'm guessing that this is AUDEN's heavy single stack. So he's doing these for the speed reps for triples, but this one is probably his single stack. And if these are 5s, then this is going to be well over 120 pounds on a pronation lift, because I think that these 2 bottom plates are 50s. And even if these are 2.5s, and then this very top one is a 1.25, that's still going to be over 110 pounds on a single pronation lift that AUDEN is doing multiple times per day. So I think that AUDEN's peak strength right now is significantly higher than it was against James English. I think against James, he was doing much closer to 100 pounds on that kind of lift. And then we're going to move on to the riser style lift over the knuckles. And it looks like AUDEN is doing this pretty much traditionally. Devin kind of loops it over the side of his hands, but it looks like AUDEN is going straight over the top here. Again, this is lower weight than he would be doing on a single or on a 1 rep max, but he's doing these quicker triples. And I'm guessing that this is a 50, 2 5s, and a 2.5, so around 62.5 plus the belt. Very solid for a weight that is just something you're doing throughout the day easily. AUDEN said that he's doing these triples, these kind of speed triples, every hour, all throughout the day. So this is obviously nowhere near his 1 rep max. He's capable of much more than this if he were going to rest and then do a single. Another thing to consider is AUDEN's arm length and his hand size. The distance between his knuckle and his wrist is very long, so that's going to make that lift a little bit more difficult than it would be for most people. Next, we have AUDEN doing the high cut multi-spinner, and it looks like he's got a 50 on here, and then a 10, and then I'm guessing that that's a 2.5, so somewhere around 62.5, similar weight as the rise lift. There could be plates on the other side as well. Can't tell from this exact angle, but once again, this isn't super difficult for him. He is struggling a little bit, but he is doing this throughout the day. So if he was rested, he would be lifting significantly more than this. And then for the low cut multi, targeting a bit more supination along with the cup, it looks like we've got a 50 plus a 10 and then a 25. So 85 pounds. And this pulley system could potentially have quite a bit of friction. It is a 1-to-1 pulley system, and it doesn't necessarily look like it would have a ton of friction. It looks pretty well built, but at the very least, AUDEN is moving 85 pounds here, which I think is pretty solid considering the diameter of this handle he's using. This isn't the easiest lift in the world for him once again, but this is definitely not his 1 rep max. He certainly has more in the tank than this if he needed to. Moving on to the press lift, AUDEN adds even more weight than before. This lift is significantly harder for me to gauge. I haven't ever tried this lift personally, and I think most people don't do this lift. And because of the fact that your joints are so stacked, this is more of a bone kind of conditioning exercise, and you're probably not going to gain a huge amount of musculature from it, although it would target your supination just a little bit. But this one is more difficult for me to gauge how impressive this actually is. But I'm just going to trust that AUDEN is getting stronger at it and that this is usable in his game plan. And now we're going to move on to some new lifts that AUDEN has been doing. And these last 2 lifts are ones that I'm very interested in. So if you guys remember, for a very long time, Devin LARRATT had never really trained his grip at all. He said it pretty much was useless because you never want to be holding on in an arm wrestling match. But then he kind of found a use case for it. If you want to grab onto your opponent's thumb, you can actually prevent them from climbing. So maybe if you're training grip on like a fat grip or something like that, that wouldn't be as useful, but they're training it on a handle that's designed to mimic the diameter of someone's thumb. So the idea is you're squeezing onto your opponent's thumb, and that can potentially give you an anchor point into the match if you have lost the ability to control height, you could still have something. This is very similar to what Michael Todd did to Devin LARRATT at WAL, or what Crazy George has done throughout a large percentage of his career. And it looks like AUDEN has a 50, and then I think these are 25s, and then maybe a 10 or a 25, but significantly more weight than he's been using on the other lifts. And this looks pretty solid. He is doing it in a pretty heavy way. He's not just repping it out like doing 50s or 100s like Devin sometimes does, but he is getting pretty close to a heavyweight here. And then the exercise that I'm most curious about out of all of the ones AUDEN has done, probably the second would be the pronation lift, but this is Ermes Gasparini's back pressure style lift. And what's so interesting to me about this is that AUDEN only has, it looks like 50 plus a 25, and I guess this is a 5. I think that they say in the video that he's lifting 80 pounds. No, I take it back. This is actually a 15 and then the 10. So this is still 80, but these plastic plates are 15. So AUDEN is only doing 80 pounds on this. And when we look at the difficulty of this lift, it's not super hard, but this definitely isn't easy for him. And this is very, very interesting because for the vast majority of people, myself included, the back pressure lift is going to normally be much easier than the pronation lift. But we saw the stack over there that AUDEN seemed to be doing was well over 100 pounds, probably over 110 pounds on pronation. But this back pressure lift, AUDEN is having quite a bit of difficulty with only 80 pounds. And from a leverage perspective, obviously the weight is going to be further out from AUDEN's elbow with this style of lift than with the pronation lift because he has a double strap. So the median strap connection is much lower. It's closer to his wrist or maybe even lower on the pronation lift. So this lift is not really hitting any pronation, but it's putting quite a bit more force onto AUDEN's elbow flexor and a little bit of internal shoulder rotation. So it's very interesting to see that balance between AUDEN's elbow flexor and his pronation. Just from watching this video, it at least appears as though AUDEN's back pressure lift is significantly lower than his pronation lift. And I remember James English talking about this after their match, that AUDEN's hand is just super, super strong, super overpowered, but his arm didn't necessarily seem quite as strong. So this is really interesting to see this. I would have guessed that AUDEN would be capable of more like 120, maybe even more pounds on this lift, since most people can do more on this one than on their pronation lift, but it seems like AUDEN has a very counterintuitive balance in these two areas. And this does make sense. He obviously has a very long forearm, so the further out the weight is from his elbow, it's going to be significantly more difficult. And I guess his hand is just so strong that maybe even for the pronation lift, the limiting factor ends up being his elbow flexor and not his pronation. But let me know what you guys think about AUDEN's training, as well as who you think is going to win in his upcoming match at King of the Table. I think that AUDEN's training is going great from the looks of things overall. He's added a couple new exercises, and I really like that he's added that Ermes Gasparini back pressure lift, because it seems like at the moment, potentially, there's a pretty significant imbalance between his pronation and his back pressure, or his elbow flexor. So I love to see the evolution in AUDEN's training, and I'm super excited to see how that's going to translate to the table in less than 3 weeks.